right, thank you very much for your patience. You've been a lovely audience. But Amelia did say right at the end of this discussion that one of the biggest problems is parity, particularly when it comes to pay between men and women, and also who is really in the seats, not just in the newsrooms, but also in the editorial offices. And so Ben Muine has the enviable task of sitting down with 3 fellow media journalists, female, and he's going to be asking, would the world look different if the news were told from a female perspective? A more provocative question: do we need feminist journalism? Good luck. Ben's mic.
Check. I'll use this while you turn mine on, I guess. Thank you so much, Edith. It's a very hard task trying to talk about women in journalism. I tried to bully Edith into doing this session so it could be an all-women panel. Then she complained and said that would be non-inclusive for the men. So they said, fine, you go have a chat with the ladies and let's see what we can do about this. I want to introduce my panel. Dr. Emily, if anyone has been with us, you'll be familiar with this incredible woman. She's one of our favorite people. She teaches at the Uganda Christian University, and I want to invite her to join me on the panel. Please give a big warm welcome to Dr. Emily Maracho. I think she should be on her way. I also want to invite someone who is a media consultant, a seasoned media practitioner. I've known her personally for a very long time. She's a very good friend of mine, Josephine Karungi, as she comes as well. And then, of course, we have Laura Ekumbo, who you have already had the privilege of interacting with at some point today. And she's also coming to be with us on this very interesting discussion as we take a look at what the world would look like if the news were told from a female perspective. Here they are. Here's Josephine Karungi. Please give another big hand clap as she sits. And right behind her, Dr. Emily Maracho, who I think will be here in just a moment. And then we have Laura as well. Nice to see you, Josephine. You're very welcome. So let me start as we wait for Dr. Emily to join us by doing something very, very brief. All right. There they are. Welcome, welcome, welcome. Can we turn my mic on so I can relinquish this one, please? Thank you very much. So, is it? Okay. Can you hear me now? You can hear me now. Okay. So, looks like this person to just. It seems that. Just trying to make sure that I just might need a handheld. I think my hips are too big. They're getting in the way of the receiver. So, yeah. So just as a stopgap, I'll use this. Thanks a lot, Benson. Big hand clap for Benson. Everybody. Super Ninja. Right. I'm holding in my hand a copy of the Daily Monitor today. So if I'm scrolling through the newspaper on average, I'm going to do this, go to page 1, go to page 2, go to page 3. Well, most men usually will start at the back because that's where the sports is, right? So, you go and check Arsenal lost yet again. I wish. Yeah, it's been very unfortunate this season because my Liverpool has been suffering. So, and then basically scroll through the newspaper. So what we did was take a newspaper, and I see Josephine is holding that, and she can show you. What Josephine is holding in her hands is a cutout. And so what we did was take a whole newspaper and try to leave only the content that was written by women. So what Dr. Emily is holding is the news articles that have been written by women. Right? It's just adverts. As in, if you try to leave, what was left of it. And right behind us, we've got some of these cuttings. We pasted them. It would be great at some point for you to take some pictures of these and tweet them. Of course, don't forget our hashtag EastFest2022 because it sort of tells a story on its own. And of course, you will probably be able to see it on the screen as well, because it definitely captures a very, very big story. And so it raises the question again: what would the world look like if the news was being told from women's perspective? Do we need feminist journalism? What's that balance? What does that even look like? I'll start with you, Laura, before we come to the academician and then person who's been in the newsroom most recently. You hear about this quite a bit. The picture tells its own story. We've heard it from the research that has been launched today. It's a bit obvious that there's quite a mismatch from a media perspective in terms of where the men are and where the women are. How big of a problem, from your perspective, is that? Should we say that's the way things are and they're not that bad at the moment? How different do you think it should be from where it is now?
I'm glad this activity was done, because it's evident that there are many gaps.
Literally and otherwise.
Literally and otherwise. And I think there are many contributing factors to those gaps. And I think it's a massive mountain to climb. And I think not everybody is climbing it.
Why? No, it's interesting how you put it. Do you think it's because there's a lack of will to climb the mountain? Is it lack of ropes to climb the mountain?
Will, definitely. I think the systems that exist that feminism tries to debunk and pull apart between capitalism and patriarchy, they make very many people comfortable. And that comfort, I think, makes it easy to choose not to climb that mountain, because you're fine. You're covered. I think that's a question you should answer. Why aren't you doing it? Why?
Maybe we don't know that it's supposed to be done. You tell us what. I don't want to cause problems for the men, because I can tend to be very, very insensitive. Yeah. So don't judge us by what I say. Yeah. Disclaimer.
Sawa.
I keep telling people this, right? And again, based on where we come from. And I have to keep explaining over and over again that because of culture and the way we've been brought up and conditioning and all of those things, by default, we tend to be clueless. And it's not a defense, it's just a harsh reality that on average, the average male will be clueless about some of this stuff. Some of the things that are said I can see how Edith is looking at me. And please hear me out. I think there is room for the patriarchal system to be taught what to do. And I'll give my personal experience outside of the newsroom into my own personal life. On a regular basis, on an almost daily basis, I have to ask my wife to teach me how to treat her because I have never been taught. This is a true story. I only learned maybe 3 or 4 years into my marriage how to recognize that my wife had been to the salon and had changed her hair. And you can tell from the nervous laughter that a lot of the men in this room still haven't learned yet. They still have to be told 3 days later, oh, I went to the salon. Oh, you did? Nice. I don't know if that makes my point.
Does. And I think you've touched on an obvious thing that's maybe not happening. But one of the things that Tulanana mentioned in the session yesterday is what you're saying now. A lot of people just don't know. And the way we make sense of the world is through stories. And if our stories aren't being told, then how would you know? And then when they are told, in the little bit that they are told, if they're put aside as this is all this written by a woman, or this is women's news, and you don't listen, then how will you know?
That's the question that we're asking, isn't it? Let me come to Josephine for a moment here, because you're in a unique position where you have run a news department at one of the biggest newsrooms in this country. And and it does deserve a big hand clap considering all the circumstances. Now, I might have some slight insights into your story, but I'd want you to share from your experience, and I hope you can allow us to put you on the spot to do that, in terms of just going by maybe your first week in the newsroom as the chief news manager. In the context of our discussion today, how much was it a baptism by fire? How much did it overwhelm you? How shocked were you at how bad the situation actually was at the time?
Thank you, Ben. Before I answer that question, I still really want us to look at these pages. I think I'm holding the only hello everyone. I think I'm holding the only newspaper that sort of has some flesh, and we can tell why, because the title is Homes and Real Estate. And this is where women contribute the most. But also, don't be deceived, because in the picture is 2 men. And that's because the title is Construction Checklist When Building a House. So that's not a place women can definitely have a contribution. Where the women contribute is on conversations like how to make hanging outdoor planters, edible flowers to add to your garden. There's another article that they forgot to cut out. I think they couldn't cut it out because on this side is a women's article, but this article is by a man, and it's construction checklist when building a house. And then, we have a bit of sense because we can contribute to education. So there is a PLE thingy here. The rest are men also speaking to PLE, but again, also in PLE, ours is English. The men are speaking to math and science and social studies. So when you really think about the entire newspaper, ways to keep your house warm during the cold season, what to consider when choosing an apartment. And in the newspaper that you were holding earlier, I like the fine detail of things. Traffic jams and congestion linked to lower birth weights, posing risks for babies. Of course, that has to be written by a woman. Hospitals integrate law on supplies as fighting resumes. Health, that's a women's angle. They're concerned about these things. China's new COVID booster vaccine to be inhaled. Health, again. Global deaths to TB on the rise after years of health. So when I look there, and I see, there's a headline I saw that was political. Front page, the East African DRC, Uhuru re-energizes peace process. Who speaks about the peace process? Who is engaged in peace processes? Women. So I just wanted to make a point on that. Ben, what was your question again?
In Kampala these days, we say, okubienyo. If you're near any of our friends from Kenya or Germany, please explain to them what that means. Yeah. But yeah, okubienyo.
Yes, I've remembered my baptism of
Your
fire.
baptism of fire in the newsroom as a leader, as a woman, and what that was like for you.
I remember there's a comment somebody made, which is the only thing that really sticks to mind. Everything else said, because I'd been in the same newsroom for so many years. The comment somebody made that stayed with me for a very, very long time was, if she failed in her marriage, how can she lead a newsroom? Have I hit hard again, Ben?
Edith, do you want to come and take over?
Is there another question that you want me to answer?
I don't think I got it. We can laugh about it, but it's not funny, is it? Dr. Emily, you train the journalists. How do men that we're training to be in these newsrooms end up saying things like that to someone who is now their boss? Is it a problem from the, I know there's a cultural angle from where they're coming from. Is there anything to do to mitigate against that when they're doing their training in journalism school? Because that's just downright unacceptable.
Let me make Josephine feel a little better by sharing two particular experiences myself. When I was doing my doctoral studies, I went to interview a news producer because my specialty is news and public affairs. So I was interviewing producers and presenters of talk shows as well. So this producer told me that he would never invite me for his political talk show in spite of my expertise in the field, because I would bore his audience. I'm not like Matembe. So, and then in another case, I was teaching a class of gender, media, and social justice for master's students who are journalists. And this journalist said that he would appreciate that course more if I was married. and this is a practicing journalist as well. And so we keep wondering about why things don't seem to change, why the world is the way it is. By the way, I think your question of would the world look different if news was told from the perspective of women, I think that the world has changed. The social change has happened. What has not happened is journalism and media actually recording and recognizing that change has happened. And that's why you can have these holes in the newspaper, because we are not recognizing it. And from a scholarship point of view, we've been, research about women and media has been ongoing for the last 20 years or so. And so much of the issues are out there, why this doesn't happen and so on. And sometimes we think having women like Josephine in positions of leadership of a newsroom will actually turn things around. And they don't, because the social structures that perpetuate these things remain unchecked. We change laws. We say, okay, before the law, men and women are equal. But actually, we go back to our homes and we are doing exactly the same things. And so it's difficult to say that we're going to see change primarily because a woman like Josephine is leading the newsroom, because I don't know what the experience was, but I can bet majority of the reporters were men and your editorial team was largely male. So there's very little. We have high expectations of the women who then end up in those spaces and make the space so difficult for them to even stay longer than they should. And then they cut short their career and leave. So as long as, and so to your question of who are these people we are training, I think the training And that's the other reason why, in spite of more women now being in the newsroom, not much is changing, because the training of journalism itself remains structurally responsive to the things that perpetuate gender inequality, to patriarchy, to all of these things. And so we train journalists. At UCU, by the way, we've tried. We've even included gender courses in the journalism curriculum. And I think that the class that I've seen change over time, that the classes over time are, the girls in the class are more assertive now. They are speaking, they're seeing the injustices, they are challenging the stereotypes. But majority of these, again, do not end up in the newsroom. They get well trained and so on, and then they're not in the newsroom. Or when they go for internship, then they find the space is not their space, and they leave. After internship, they're looking for something else. And that takes me back to the conversation we had yesterday. And I think that it's easy to say that media is full of rubbish, like we had yesterday, that there's nothing interesting, there's nothing that can capture the young people, there's just a whole lot of hot air, as someone put it yesterday. But we also have to ask ourselves, where are these young people who are trained to actually fill those spaces and make those changes? Where are they? They should be. They were in the room here, but they are all saying for the last 5 years, I haven't read a newspaper. Why are you trained as a journalist if you haven't even read the East African in the last 5 years? How will you know about the region? How do you know what issues are actually critical for the region and what's actually there? You're now judging journalism without even ever engaging with it, and you are supposed to be a trained journalist. So I think there's so many issues around just news content and what it means for the larger society.
Thank you, Dr. Emily. If I can ask the three of you, you mentioned something there about stereotypes. What do you think are the biggest stereotypes that are still being perpetuated in, if we talk about newsrooms in particular, but in the wider scheme of things in journalism as a whole, from gender perspectives, the ones that stand out for you the most, and then we'll hear from Laura and Josephine.
Ones that stand out the most, women are good at covering fashion, food. Food is a space for women, and soft stories, health, education. These are stereotypes because we've seen women, if given the right tools and the right environment, can actually do good political stories. But again, because that stereotype exists, then they are not given an opportunity to actually excel in even growing. They're not mentored into doing the hard stories. And by the way, there's nothing particularly wrong with doing good health and education and whatever stories, because these things have begun, these things stay with us. They matter for us women because we see that they are not being given the attention they deserve. So when I became a columnist, I deliberately chose to do little of political stuff, not because I'm not knowledgeable. In fact, public affairs is my specialty. I do the others because I think that they are the areas neglected. So we fall in the trap of just looking at what is being neglected and filling the gaps and filling the holes. And so that's part of the problem.
Right. Laura, for you, what do you think is the biggest stereotype that you see when it comes especially to journalism and media and women?
I think maybe just to say now, for the sake of all the distinguished human beings in the audience who have gone through journalism courses, and I'm not a journalist. I don't have experience in the newsroom. So a lot of what I know is from my peers and from my experience reading the news and watching the news. And the freedom to exist fully is infringed upon by a constant recycling of the conversation about stereotypes. And I think I don't want to add more to it.
Yeah, I absolutely hear you. Again, for the interest of the people who want to learn, I think sometimes, like I said earlier, some of them sometimes don't even know that they are, exacerbating that particular stereotype. So maybe just in terms of the biggest ones that you dealt with that shocked even you, like, you're fighting against something, but you're still sort of And I'm really hoping you can open up, because I know you have a lot of stories to tell, and I'm hoping you can tell them.
No, I'm not going to tell stories, but if you'll allow me, I'd like to ask the audience members, not directly to ask, but if I say something and it rings a bell, like you've heard it as well. So women don't like to speak. Women are, you want them to come for an interview at 8 p.m., that's time to cook supper, or they are taking care of the babies. The babies are bathing, they have homework. Okay, I see Olivia's hand is like she's just jumping out of a chair. No, there are no women in that field. I couldn't find an expert in that field who was a woman. Yes, when we bring her, she's going to be emotional. We won't be able to get, information from everybody else. Okay. Olivia's head is going to follow because we've had the same stories. So women don't want to speak. Women are not available to speak. We don't have women in that field. We don't have, there's always something. And I'll give you an example.
They don't have an interesting viewpoint.
Exactly. Or they don't know how, they're not trained to speak. So they'll get there, you'll ask them the question. I don't know, I think we're all eloquent. A bit. We try. Right? Okay. Or if you get them, they won't be able to adequately express this issue. Or their view on it is primary because it's coming from a certain position. I was attending a conversation on the transport regulatory sector, something like that, recently. And I entered the room and there were men. And I know we constantly have this battle about having too many men, and then, the men say, what's wrong with us, manos, and so on. We've had these fights. But when I got into this room, I looked, I wasn't surprised because it's on the transport sector, taxis, borders. So who drives taxis? Who rides borders, And in the middle of the conversation, we get a manual that was being released. And in the middle pages, I see a woman. So I went and I asked, and they said, she's actually here. She's a woman border cyclist, but she was somewhere at the back of the room, somewhere, on a table surrounded by men. And when so I had to go and coax her into saying something. And the man sitting next to her had to say, please say something. She said, I'm not sure. I said, but you're talking and you're speaking. The problem is not even the language. You can actually speak. And she stood up and said something. So the conversations around, we don't have women in that sector, we have them. We don't have women, and this is just to speak to the stereotype, but to address it. We have women in those sectors. Women do know how to speak. Why are we sending them to school if we then don't expect them to speak at the end of the day? Women can make the time, or if they can't make the time, because they genuinely have to cook for the kids and send them to bed and do their homework with them, and all of these things we have to do. Record your interview. Are you intentional about having this woman come to speak to whatever it is you're doing? It's the 9 p.m. news, right? I'm still in town at 5 p.m. Call me, certainly not me, but call that woman for her expert opinion at 4 p.m. Go to her office if it's that important to you that you have her perspective, and get it. The audience that you're serving wants not just one person's view, a man's world, and so on. They would want to know about this issue from another perspective. So the women are there, they're available, they can speak. But how have you treated them to the point that now they're freely able to even make time for your whatever it is you need them for?
Thanks, Josephine. Did you, from a newsroom perspective, do you have situations where, in terms of allocation of duties, I think Dr. Emilia has touched on this, and we've seen it from the Carters and all, that on average, the women will be assigned to what are seen as the softer, smaller stories. Did you ever encounter situations where, if you tried to assign women to some of the big stories, there was resistance, and how did you deal with that?
So I was never really an assignments editor, but I've sort of gone through the newsroom, and I know that some women had reservations. But again, it also comes from the role models you have in the newsrooms on TV. If I follow which woman journalist? A name that comes to mind, and I follow her and I see, but all she covers is health stories. I begin to feel like maybe health issues. Yeah, that's what I want to do. And you find that most of them, like Emily said, are in those areas. We're in health, we're in education, women's stories. But my personal journey was, I wanted to find out what I really wanted to talk about, what I really wanted to write about, what I really wanted to... So I had to figure out the passion. So I did court for a while. I did whatever. I even went to Somalia at some point. I tried to just be sure that I wanted to cover this area before I settled and said, listen, the gap that I see is women, gender issues, and those ones tickle me a little, children and women and so on. So I said, that's where I want to focus. So when some women, the ones that I have conversations with, when they have reservations about which beat I'm going to take, it's not so much that I don't want to do politics. If you dig deeper, it's possibly going to be, I don't see a lot of us doing it, so I'm not even sure if it's our area or if they've seen that from somewhere. It's the examples that all of us are setting as journalists. It's also passion. It's what am I interested in? What's close to my heart? I have kids, so I want to do stories that are relating to those issues. It's the opportunities given in the newsroom. Sometimes in assignments, the editor says, politics, so-and-so, you're going to parliament, so-and-so, you're going to follow up Ministry of Health, so-and-so, you're going to... And it takes a long time for you to be able to build the trust of the editor to be able to say, okay, you go to parliament. So most women come in with their minds already made up. We don't have a platform there. Yeah. And if they are not intentional about growing it, then that gap remains.
Like a tiny follow-up, I'm curious how much of that is also like safe spaces with parliament and the politics and some of those sectors being majority filled with a certain kind of human?
Break down.
It's okay. You can say the men.
Break down that
fine.
question. Break down when you say safe spaces. We use it very lightly, and we keep saying safe spaces. I want to understand what exactly you're asking.
Right. So. I don't know what your experience was going into the sectors that are majority occupied by male, but if you're the only female there's questions of physical safety, emotional safety. If you have a job to do and you have multiple obstacles, I can imagine that even beyond just doing the assignment, I can imagine that that's not a safe space that you'd want to go into.
I think the world in general is not a safe space. So if you're sending out journalists, safety comes in so many forms. A newsroom is not a safe space. Emily, I don't know if I'm on the right track, but I don't think it is, because it's where you get in and you're seeing all kinds of things, and it is your job to filter all of this to put out what's acceptable. If I go to the field and I have a scar from one of the first things I ever covered, and I fell down in the middle of the riot and were running, and next thing I know, a reporter's camera was aimed exactly here, because blood was, and I hadn't noticed, I hadn't felt the pain, because we were running. And then I see blood trickling. So that's the physical safety. There's nothing like that, and this is for men and women. We are all going to the battlefront. And I think where you're speaking to might be in terms of sexual assault and so on, in terms of you're conducting interviews. There's no safety in a lot of places. It is, how are you willing to take the chance? Are you trained to respond to them? And do you have the support when you come back to the newsroom to help you, maybe forge a way forward? Do you have, for most news anchors, and especially women, the tabloids absolutely adore them. They will do anything for them. And that's also in issues of spaces. Newsrooms don't have counseling services. They don't have an HR that's trained to see you as the front page and then come and sit down with you and say, how can I help you? You know, they would rather fire you because you are spoiling the good name of the institution. So safe spaces, the world is not a safe space. We'd be asking for too much, especially in, for a newsroom, but it is how we are helping each other. I tried to handhold as many women as I could. How do you support them? How do you prepare them for the journey that's ahead of them? How do you guide them through? If you know they are going to cover a particular thing, sometimes you say, listen, make sure you go with a camera person who and make sure the camera person doesn't leave the room.
Yeah.
But also how do you support yourself where we cannot support you? I don't know if I'm answering your question.
Yeah, no. So it's interesting you mentioned that because I actually wanted to touch on it. So Josephine is saying that there's no safe space, well, generally, but I guess it's a lot worse for the women who were at an event actually with Dr. Emily just last week for the Uganda Media Week, and I asked all the female journalists in the room, and it was a bit sensitive, right? And so what I did was ask every woman who is a journalist in the room to put up their hand if they had not been harassed at some point in the course of their work. And it was very interesting. I don't know if you remember what happened. There was, I think Robert was with us, so he remembers this, and there was one young lady, I think was just gotten into the newsroom, and she raised her hand. And it was interesting to see, especially the women, look at her like, maybe she doesn't know what harassment is, right? And that for me was quite telling in terms of how to deal with that. And I'll come to you, Dr. Emily, to talk through that just a little bit. If it is okay, I'm going to ask the same question here, and this is a safe space, I think. Yeah, I promise it's a safe space. If you're a female and you're a journalist in some capacity or form, please put up your hand for me. Right? You're a female, you're a journalist, please put up your hand for me. Okay. If you have not been harassed at some point, put your hand down. If you've not, if you have, your hand stays up. The question is not clear. Okay, if you're let's do it very simply. And please follow me. If you're a female and you're a journalist, put your hand up and keep it up. Okay, keep your hand up. Now, if you have not been harassed, put your hand down. If you have not been harassed, put your hand down. Okay, thank you very much. I think that tells the entire story. It's quite heavy to sort of deal with, and I'll leave that burden to Dr. Emily to, talk through what Josephine was saying. We talk about COVID, we talk about Ebola as epidemic. This is an epidemic, if you think about it from that perspective. It's almost emotional for me just to see how bad this is. Why do you ruminate on that? Laura, there's something that Josephine mentioned about going to a meeting and there's a female border rider and she almost has to be forced to say anything, and how she has had to try and handhold many women in the newsroom and all over the place. Do you think that at some level women have sort of been beaten into submission where they're like, you know what, well, this is what it is, so okay. Right? Is that a real thing? And how do we get them to be able to stand up for what's rightfully theirs? And this is the equality we're talking about.
Sure.
The question is, in terms of what happens with women, do you think that women have sort of, by and large, allowed to be beaten into submission, where they feel like, I can't change the status quo, so I'm just going to go with things as they are and not ask too many questions and put up a fight? And how do we get them to be able to refuse that narrative and that perspective and stand up and fight for their rights? I don't know if that makes any sense.
It makes sense. Are we beaten into submission? Do you feel like you've been beaten into submission? It's tough. No, you don't feel like you've been beaten into submission. It's exhausting. We're tired. Beyond tired. We want rest. Rest is not possible because the work is not done. And we are the ones doing it. And we will continue to do it because how else do we survive?
Well said. I'm going to come to you guys in a moment so we can get some feedback from you. I know there's a lot, so I need to give some time to that. Let's just quickly touch on this mammoth in the room.
Let me just ask, of the people who kept their hands up that they have ever been harassed, how many reported somewhere or tried to seek help? You see?
Wow.
Only
Only
three
two.
out of the many, no, there were three
Yeah,
out of
three.
the many hands.
So, yeah.
Because that's part of the problem, that we kind of normalize this. We think that, okay, you're supposed to be harassed. Everybody gets harassed. So you come into the newsroom, the interns come and they're sort of inducted and they know that the harassment is part of the newsroom culture. So we have a newsroom culture where it's acceptable to be harassed. And if it's your boss, the person assigning you the stories and sending you to health stories, and you want to go to parliament, you probably have to let that be and not report it anywhere. So we need to be, I don't know whether it's something we have to do from a training point of view and ensure that actually these girls who do journalism get agency. They are within the newsroom, but they have agency too. They can fight, they can push back, that they're able to say, no, I don't want that. I've come to do work and you don't have to touch me, and so on. So there are very subtle ways of harassing women out of the newsroom.
So, how do they do that without, again, like you've seen from the responses, you've got a big problem in terms of if I report this, it's going to be the end of what I do.
That's why I started from the point of view of the training, but also within the newsroom, and I think this is something HR departments in newsrooms have to deal with, you know, having mentors, having people that women find safe to speak to and actually are able to get guidance and help. And if the guy is like Ben Winnie here, you might also fall off your feet and think that, oh, okay, this is okay. So there are many things. And recently I actually saw a research report done by WANIFRA, Women in News, and the statistics were astonishing. There are women saying that even drivers, you know, these drivers that take them to the field also harass them. And it's amazing how the cycle of harassment is just endemic.
Yeah, and you're talking about HR, hoping that the HR is not the one doing the harassing.
I hope not.
We're just saying, right? Edith. Can we turn on Edith's mic? She'll start, and then we'll go around the room. We'll come to Angel, and then go back. I see Carol, and then we'll come to this side.
So I'm really glad we're having this conversation and that Ben is the one moderating it. It was by design, because I think at times as women, we tend to speak to one another and the information somehow doesn't filter out. And my first point is to what Ben said in the beginning, that we just don't know. But I feel that this narrative is old and tired. It's similar to when men say boys will be boys. You're journalists. It's your job to know. When you look around the newsrooms and you don't see women, what do you think is happening? The second point is, where are the women in the technical fields? Look at the back there. That's our technical team. How many women are there? None. Where are they? The third point is...
Sorry, Simon. Yeah.
Yeah, I'm just pointing...
Simon, why aren't they here?
And the reason I say this is because only the wearer of the shoe knows where it bites. And if the women in the newsrooms are not empowered, if there are no women in the technical departments, there is no way there can be feminist journalism. So the breakdown of women, unfortunately, begins in the office. Sexual harassment, we're talking about it outside of the newsrooms. It happens within the newsrooms as well. Our editors, our colleagues, our drivers, they're the ones who are also sexually harassing us. Where are the frameworks to protect us? The other point is, when it comes to women and our biological needs, I've seen women who are my colleagues having to pump breast milk in the toilet. In the toilet. I've seen us being asked, why are you being so emotional today? Are you on your period? Yes, as a matter of fact, I am. I'm in a foul mood. What do you want me to do about it? And my final point is, as women, I really want us to challenge ourselves. What is our responsibility? The truth is, as the ones who are victimized, it is our incentive to change the system. And if we don't report these things happening, if we don't call for more women to be trained, if we don't call for more women to be in HR, to be in our editorial newsrooms, then the system will never change.
Thank you very much, Edith. Let's come to the front, starting with Angel. Let's start with Angel. Edith, I was telling a story last week that I should probably just repeat for you. I know about a newsroom where one of the reporters was pregnant and needed to go see a doctor. And so she goes to her editor and asks for permission to go see the doctor. And the editor looks at her and repeats. And again, I'm going to say it in Luganda because it carries weight when it's said the way it is. And for the people who are around, the people that don't speak Luganda, please interpret for them. The guy looked at her very seriously and told her, "Naliyo nga bakujja mu empale." And she thought he was joking, but he wasn't. And he told her to go back to work. Right? True story.
My neighbors will translate.
Yeah, I'll interpret for Dr. Emily while Angel, who is still looking like she's in a daze processing this, says something, and then we'll go around the room.
Okay, hello everyone. So I want to give a student's perspective on all of this. I have a piece that says when it comes to the patriarchy, it's the audacity for me. I was one of
Do you want to play that for us as we wrap up the session, if you don't mind?
Yeah, I can perform it, by all means. So I went to the Aga Khan High School, and we had a culture where we would have work placement. So my very first experience in the workplace was at a media house. And a couple of friends of mine and I were being harassed by a certain gentleman, a news reporter, yes? And we felt very uncomfortable. So we expressed this to the human resource manager. At the time, I was 15. And he was asking for my number, calling me beautiful, very inappropriate things, yeah? But it wasn't necessarily physical assault. But had I stayed longer, and then anyway, so we reported this matter to the human resource manager, and he said, "Did he touch you?" I said, "No." Then yeah, that is the field you're entering in if you can't handle it, and I was 15. When I joined the School of Journalism, I'm a second-year student at the university. My female lecturer said, we live in a patriarchal world. It is not only journalism, it is law, it is engineering, fashion and design, food, patriarchal, yeah? And I agree with that. And I believe that one of the fastest ways to sort of eradicate this hindrance is by engaging the patriarchs themselves. And this I'm telling you from a student's perspective. I have had all my male lecturers, all they say to me is, "Oh, you have a pretty face. You'd look good on TV. You have a pretty face. You'd look good on TV." And that is why we have so many people, girls in school, limiting themselves to, pretty face. And actually, I will quote, one of them said, if you don't have a pretty face, you won't be on TV, but you can make it into features. And he said, features, not so much money, but that is where you belong if you're not pretty enough, if you don't make the cut,
And
right?
Yeah. Can you please stop putting the camera on me? I'm trying to process emotions here.
So
Simon, don't make me look bad. I don't want to cry on camera, man.
yeah, all the academia field is dominated by men. These men are teaching us. These men are the people we look up to for inspiration. So if Professor X is telling me, it's pretty face TV, if you don't have a pretty face, and I don't know that I have an option of being a writer, of being an editor, video editor, being a sub-editor, and the conversations that they have with my male classmates, is completely different. They're telling me, Angel, you have a pretty face. Then they'll ask Kevin, what do you think about the war in Ukraine? Kevin, please tell us about how Alan is reporting in BBC. Angel, when you're on TV, you're supposed to dress, for your skin color, you dress dark colors so that you don't have contrast, So I am objectified in class, yeah? And I'm not informed of the choices that I have. And so I reach 4th year, and I don't know what to do with this skill, yeah? So this is just from the schools, how you are training us. The system is patriarchal, and we need to engage the patriarchs. These men who are teaching us, what are they saying? The language you're using, how can you diminish me to a pretty face?
Right.
How can you diminish me to a pretty face?
Thank you. Thank you so much, Angel. Let's move along. Yeah, let's be mindful of time. We want to try and get as many thoughts as we can around the room, so thank you.
Thank you. I think we can all agree. I really agree with you on engaging the patriarchy and more so.
If you don't mind telling us who you are and what you do, so we can get to know you, please.
My name is Tulanana Bohela. I'm a journalist. I used to work for BBC for about 9 years, and I'm also a media innovator. I co-found a company called Honor Stories, and we are part of the Innovators in Residence cohort number 2, so with this lovely lady over here. And so I would just like to say that I agree about engaging the patriarchy, and more so on the point of allyship. If you know better, do better. So if you're my male colleague and you hear and you know that this guy, other male colleague of yours, is doing something wrong, you have the connect to be the one to speak up for me. Because if I speak up, maybe I don't have the guts to speak up or things like that, right? So your silence, by you being silent, you're being compliant. You can say, I don't do that to girls, I've never done that, blah, blah, blah. But by you being silent about it, by knowing that XXS, haha, you laugh over, XXS, he always has lines, he always has this, and you are being compliant by doing that. You're supporting the same thing. Also, in the same thing, protection is being able to explain. It's hard, but being able to manage when I give an instance when I was verbally, someone made a similar joke but in Swahili, but the roundabout was, if this room was, you're so beautiful, if this room was full of men, they would rape you first. That was a joke. He was laughing. Mind you, he was laughing. It was really a joke to him. And of course, now you have to be there like, okay, wait, process. And of course, I lashed out first. But then I had to now build myself, put on my big girl pants, tie my fallopian tubes, and go to him and say, listen, we are friends. However, do you understand why what you said was wrong? He was apologizing, but I was like, do you understand why you said it was wrong? Because, of course, he was scared that I'll go report him to HR. But do you understand why? I said, I do not leave the newsroom if I don't leave the newsroom at 5 p.m., with the rest of the crew, I have to wait for the 7 p.m. crew who will be transported. And I only live 5 minutes away. Do you know why? Because rape is actually something that will affect me. Like if I actually go out at night, that's something that can happen to me. Do you want that to happen to me? No. So being part of it, trying to be also part of the allyship yourself. Because honestly, some of these things, they just don't know. I agree with you. They just don't know, but that doesn't mean it's an excuse. Yeah.
Thank you very much. Let's go to Caro Beanga just behind there. It is not an excuse. I think I can speak for a lot of men, and I will tell you for a fact that again, not an excuse, but I think in our foolishness, many men will not be aware that just the words that they use and the damage that they cause. Like like you're saying, he thinks he's joking. Empathy, emotional maturity. Yeah, so can we be honest and admit that it is very possible that the majority of men lack that? No? I'm not trying to excuse it. Let's hear from Carol. I'm just trying to say, because for me it doesn't make any sense. Why else would men keep doing that? Exactly, because it really baffles.
Thank you. My name is Carol Aliek Beyanga. I work with Nation Media Group as head of mentorship and partnerships. Nice to be here. So I want to say that having women in the newsroom, it's been difficult. It's been a slow process, but there is progress. There's progress. Just look there. We had Josephine, who was a news manager at NMG, the first female, which was second female, after Betty, right? After Betty, yes, second female. And for me, that was a good thing, and I hope it'll happen again. We had Laura, who was a keynote performance, person here, the story. Stories told like that, I thought, I wish more stories could be told like that, so they're more engaging. We have Miss Emily Marakso, who's not only at UCU as Director of Research Policy, but is on the board at Daily Monitor. Not just that, she is the head of the editorial committee of the board. So I feel there's progress. It's little, it's slow, but there is progress. And I think when we acknowledge that progress, then we push for more. So I'd like that we sort of push for more. That when that progress happens, we push for it, we applaud it, and we ask for more. And I don't want to sound defensive. I was like, it had to be Monitor. The newspaper that they put up, I was like, oh God, it had to be us. But it's true that there are few female reporters, but they're there across all fields, from business to politics to sport, but it needs to be more. I understand it needs to be more. And just to speak from my experience very quickly, I was managing editor at the Daily Monitor for a few months, and it was one of the toughest roles I ever had. Tough. And I remember there was a point when I kept thinking, why do I have to go to work today? It was really, really tough. But later on, and that was in 2014, but many years, and for a long time, I kept thinking that was one of the most difficult times. I don't think I should have, it had bad memories for me. But later on, in 2021, I began to ask myself, maybe it was a good experience for me. I know it was difficult, but maybe it was good. What are the things that I could have done, that I could have learned? And after going through a mentorship, I began to realize that there were things I could have learned to do better. There were things I was good at, but I didn't push at. There were things about myself that were flaws that I could have done better with. So I think, like Emily said, we need to have a lot more training, which is why I'm keen on mentorship, because there are many things that we are able to do as women, but we don't know that we can do them. We don't know that we can get support. We don't know that we have allies in the newsroom. We don't know how to, many of these things, because of how the patriarchy has, pushed us down. But if a fellow one can come and say, you know what, you can do it, and I'm going to work with you, that would help. And finally, I'd just like to say that there are many men who make life difficult, but there are men who make life amazing. And there are men in my newsroom, I have worked with, my supervisors, and I really, I'm grateful to my juniors, because they never ever gave me hell and say, she's a woman. No, they respected me. They did what I asked them to do. So I think there are those men that are there, and we should applaud them.
Thank you very much, Carol. We are out of time. I have, however, begged Simon to give us an extra 5 minutes, so I'm going to go to this side. Okay, let's start to this side. I need a man's perspective, right? Yeah, I don't. Oh, so no men? You're discriminating against us now. Let's come and start here with Simon. Just for the benefit of. We literally only have 3 minutes to go, so I'm going to ask that we keep it very brief. As we hear from Simon, I just wanted to point out to Carol Beyanga that in fairness to you, Dr. Emily is holding today's copy of the Daily Monitor, and we've circled all the women's stories, and there isn't a page that doesn't have a byline by a woman, starting from page 2 all the way through. So, and there's about maybe 3 or 4 pages in a row where all the articles are by women, so you've obviously done a very good job. And the copy script is available if anyone wants to take a look at that after. Right. So I think we'll just have maybe 2 more. I'll start here and then we'll go to the lady in the middle and then we'll continue this conversation again on Twitter and online and at lunchtime. Right.
Okay. Thank you for that. I would like to say something. Many times, personally, sometimes in life, one thing I would like to say, that women are really vulnerable people. I personally have experienced women, mostly the women who are disabled, they're also vulnerable. But there is one key issue I've learned to keep in my life, is that to fight for my personal space. Wherever I go, I always know that something I need, it's a must, I must have it, and I must fight for it. I must make sure that I have it. So I think women should also fight for their personal space. So if you want something, maybe you want the newsroom, you want a newsroom somewhere, you want a home, you want to work, school, anything you want, you should fight for yourself. Yourself should fight for the personal space. That's what I would tell the women. Vulnerability is an opportunity for you to advocate for equality. So if you're vulnerable and you do not want to fight for your personal space, then it's going to be hard for you. So you need to know that you're vulnerable and fight for your personal space. That's my idea and opinion of fight for a better space.
Right,
Thank you.
Lastly for now.
Okay, thank you very much. I'm listening to the room. I work with kids. I train children on journalism. And I have all of them, like the girls, when we started, they all wanted to be Edith Kimani and, or Victoria Rubadiri, okay? So there's this perception of what you have to look in the media, and this is affecting the younger ones. And now, they're welcome to my social media or to my YouTube channel, So there's this whole influencer thing, and all the influencers, unfortunately, look the same. I think they have the same brander who put all their makeup the same, their eyebrows have to look the same. I can't be an influencer. My hair does not say I'm an influencer. My hair has to be this long. And unfortunately, that's what our media space is promoting as media women. Unfortunately, that's what they're promoting. And that's how our young girls are growing up, looking at this, and they're saying, I am dark, I am short, okay? I put on glasses so I cannot be in the media. So amazing, I have a group of amazing storytellers, but because they don't look a certain way, they feel I am not able to do that. So a report by Plan International, is it last year or the year before, showed the negative impact of how the media depicts girls, okay? So if I want to I do media tech, and we tell girls, why don't you go and tell your own story? They say, no, I am not Jeff Koinange, okay? So I cannot be, I don't have, because everybody, for you to be brilliant, you have to be a Larry Madawo, So how you depict the media, the people you show on the media impact the younger ones. So I am struggling here, telling girls, you can go and tell your own stories, but they feel, I cannot be able. So I think as you're talking this conversation, we have to not think about us, but the next generation of storytellers.
Thank you very much. And that's why our theme this year is local change, where it begins, and then takes us to global impact, so we can build informed and thriving communities using journalism. We have to close this session for now because of time, unfortunately, but this is something that should continue. Again, our hashtag, okay? Go start these conversations online. Let's continue them. Let's engage with the people.